Rất nhiều làng nghề truyền thống của Việt Nam với các nghề làm giấy, sản xuất thép, đúc đồng cũng đang phải đối mặt với nguy cơ gây ô nhiễm môi trường. Cái cách cứ mặc cho chất thải tự nhiên tràn ra, ngấm sâu vào đất, vào nước ở ngay địa phương xung quanh đang hủy hoại cả một vùng sinh thái. Theo kết quả xét nghiệm của Viện Khoa học và Công nghệ Môi trường, Trường Đại học Bách khoa Hà Nội, thì 100% mẫu nước thải ở các làng nghề đều vượt quá tiêu chuẩn cho phép. Nước mặt, nước ngầm đều có dấu hiệu ô nhiễm. Ở các làng nghề, ô nhiễm thường xảy ra hai dạng, ô nhiễm nguồn nước và ô nhiễm không khí. Tuy nhiên, ô nhiễm môi trường cũng tỷ lệ thuận với những lợi ích về kinh tế. Và đây là bài toán mà các doanh nghiệp có đầu tư lớn phải tìm lời giải.
First of all, I think that it's not difficult to look outside and see that there is a lot of environmental degradation going on, and people are naturally worried about that. Second, there's an awful lot of legitimate debate about whether green GDP is a good measure of environmental and economic performance, or the relationship between environmental and economic performance. And third, I think that the green GDP debate happens to highlight a tension between the national government and the provincial governments and local governments about environmental regulation. It's an important debate. I think a lot of this misses the point, however. I think that reports over the relationship, or reports about the relationship between the economy and the environment are important. But after all, we don't need to see a report about the ecological footprint or green GDP to know that today there is ongoing environmental degradation that is threatening public health, and I can understand why provinces who have been competing with each other for economic progress, that's not so much the problem. The problem is figuring out how to change that set of incentives. Well, let me suggest that this brings into sharp focus something that's very important, and that is the relationship between the national government and the provincial governments, which I think is behind, in part, the whole green GDP debate about whether or not to release it. When SEPA leaves the scene, when SEPA leaves the Huawei River, the provinces, the provincial officials are still there. And somehow the national government needs to figure out how to ensure that the provincial and local governments are doing the job of monitoring and enforcement. And I think that the best thing you can say about all of these measures, green GDP, ecological footprint, and so forth, are that together they're a very important wake-up call to everyone. One of the most important decisions that we made in the United States in the late 60s was that we could not permit the states in the United States, all 50 states, to set their own rules for what was going to be required in terms of water quality, because rivers, for example, flow through many, many states. If there's a factory on that river that is dumping untreated effluent into that river, relating that act of dumping that effluent into that river to a green GDP report and in turn to the performance of local officials based on that kind of measurement system, and using that as the means to try to stop that effluent from being poured into that river, I submit to you, is unlikely to work in time. Because instead of measuring the performance of local officials, it may be better to measure the performance of polluters, whether it's industries or municipalities or others who are emitting effluents or emissions into the water or into the air. And I think there has to be a focus on figuring standards that govern the performance of industries and other polluters. My point is that unless the national government sets uniform standards and requires the enforcement, monitoring enforcement of those standards on a uniform and predictable way across the country, you're not going to achieve the kind of uniform, consistent compliance.